Well, hello and welcome back to another evening of racing here at CVR. My name is Pirate Lazebeam and I'll be doing the commentary as usual for today's race, and you're joining us here for the 1932 Indianapolis 500. It's going to be a 120 lap race around this historic circuit from the 1930s version, of course, and it's going to be something quite different today compared to the previous rounds of this championship. This is round 13. And whilst we have had a little bit of oval racing in the last 12 rounds, these are European Grand Prix cars, a little bit out of their familiar territory, and over in America now for the Indy 500, which is a very special type of race with particular regulations. And a little bit like Le Mans, the cars have a specific kind of configuration for today's race. So we're talking about kind of non-supercharged engines, better cooling solutions for the higher revs which are sustained for a long period of time. There's specific tyres which are required for racing at Indy 500, and that is mandated by AAA Racing. So all of the drivers today will be using the same type of tyre compound. You've also got slight differences in kind of stiffer chassis and so on, just to handle the punishment which the Indianapolis circuit will throw at the cars. So a little bit different. It also means that certain cars are going to be favoured over others. As you can imagine, it's a combination of top speed and then kind of oval-orientated handling, which is crucial for today's racing. So it's going to be interesting how this affects things. But the Bugattis are the favourite in terms of speed. We've got Peltonen, Nurmi, and Uatila are all strong favourites for the podium. The Talbot is pretty well balanced and fast, so Hallen, Von Rosen and Renaud may also be in with a shot today. And then we've also got some American Indy cars in amongst the European, so it'll be interesting how those go. Tolonen is the sole driver of the Studebaker, and we've also got some slower Jones Miller privateer cars in the mix. But the advantage of the Jones Miller privateer car, although it's not the fastest, is that it has the lowest fuel consumption, and in theory, given the tyres can in principle make the entire race distance without having to be changed, the Jones Miller privateer car is the only car with the lowest fuel consumption, which may mean it can do a single dot to the finish line without any stops. So interesting both in terms of the dynamics there, and it's going to be interesting to see how things shape up. Race will be getting underway in just a few moments. I'm going to bring up the starting grid for you, so you can see that we've got Crozet in first place, Marcus Peltonen in second place. We've got Kari Uatila, in P3, Nurmi in P4. So strong favourites for the podium, but also favourable starting positions as well. And then you can see the remainder of the driving lineup there in the grid form, as you can see on the screen right now. In addition, we have the standings for the championship so far, and as you can see, Nurmi is out in first place with Marcus Peltonen in P2, only 2 points separating those two drivers. Heitinen in third place with 310 points, so close but not quite as close as the top two. And then a bit of a step off before you get down to P4, where Kari Uatila is on 280 points, followed by Tolonen on 270, and that makes up the top 5 of the 40 which are in the lineup thus far. So it should be very interesting racing today. It's going to be a bit of punishment for the cars, and it'll be interesting to see how the pit stop strategies play into the tactics today. But very much looking forward to this one. And sorry, I'm just seeing in chat here, Paradox saying that there was no image, just sound. I assume that there is video, because I'm also watching the stream back and I can see video coming through. But let me know if there are any issues on that front, and I'm just going to tweak the audio settings as well so that everything's in balance. So we'll be getting underway in just a few moments, and it's going to be interesting to see how this one plays out today. 120 laps coming your way, 99% track conditions. 36 degrees on the track temperature and 2 km wind, so that won't be too impactful. But anyway, lights are up, engines are revving. And away we go. It's going to be a formation lap. So this isn't the start of the race, but the drivers will be getting into their assigned qualifying positions before a flying lap begins from a rolling start. And this is the pace car. So, as many of you I'm sure will be aware, Indianapolis is, I suppose it's technically an oval, but it's more of like a rounded off rectangle. So you've got 4 straights, 2 long straights, 2 short straights connected by 90-degree corners with steep banking, and it's an interesting combination. Obviously still used in its current format in modern racing, but with a different track texture as well. I think there's also mention of kind of cobbled bricks at certain points, but there's also kind of regular tarmac. Obviously, in modern Indianapolis, it's civic tarmac all the way around with probably steeper banking. I would say this is 1930s, so it's not quite as steep as it is in the current format. But obviously, a very deceptive track. It looks straightforward, but actually it's a very careful game of getting the perfect lines and holding your nerve all the way around for many a lap. So it'll be interesting to see how this goes. There you go. You can now see some of the bricks underfoot, under tyre as it were. Should be getting ourselves into position now for the flying start. Pace cars coming in. And our drivers are getting ready to roll here. And there we go, we're off to the races. All the drivers putting their foot down now and getting the momentum up as they head into T1. And as you can imagine, top speed is going to be incredibly important here during today's racing. That's why the Bugattis are in a pretty strong position. But there may also be factors pertaining to reliability. I mentioned earlier on that the cooling solutions have had to be improved to allow the cars to sustain the high RPMs. And then you can see Marcus Peltonen already starting to pull away as they overtake Crozet, take the first spot. Go ahead and dial in a slightly higher exposure. But yes, pretty much top end speed being a crucial factor. Drivers also having to keep a nice clean line. If they have a puncture for any reason, that's going to be a really big issue on a circuit like this. Hopefully that doesn't result in any major collisions, but you can imagine the chaos that might ensue if that happens with a big swarm of cars coming up behind. But thus far, it's Marcus Peltonen leading. A bit further down, we've got Kai Sivertsen and Paul van Rosen just trading positions there. Kai Sivertsen moving up to P6. And then down in P16, we've got Henry and Pereira with Clio in the mix as well. I think Clio's just checking there. They're not driving the Amel car anymore. I think the Amel car would have been a little bit underpowered for today's race. Leo and Henry still side by side as they head down the back straight. Getting an onboard view here with Henry, and you can see them navigating through one of the corners, trying to keep pace with Clio. Of course, the leaf spring suspension there doing its best to keep the car steady. Up in P5 we've got Kai Sivertsen and Hallin trading positions as well. Kai Sivertsen now moving up to P5 and extending that gap to Hallin. Let's take a look here at P10. We've got Kayla French, who I was enjoying their participation in the THR 12 Hours of Le Mans recently. Good to see a few of the CVR drivers attending that event, which I had the pleasure of commentating on as well. Like Korkajowski here has a little bit of pressure coming in from Haley Smith. 0.2 of a second separating these two, and Haley potentially getting a bit of a run here. Now, as I mentioned, all the drivers are on the same tyre compound, which can potentially do the whole race distance. It will be fuel, if anything, which brings the drivers in to the pit lane, at least for intended pit stops. There might be some unintended for various mechanical reasons. But the fact that everyone's on the same tyre compound does remove a little bit of the uncertainty from that point of view. It'll be interesting to see if any of the drivers do need to change their tyres, or whether it would just simply be a splash and dash fuel stop. But Haley going side by side down the cobbles here against Korkajowski. They head down the back straight. Again, something to consider with banked corners like this is being in the inside line doesn't necessarily... Ooh, Haley Smith has just rotated and has hit the wall. That's what I was worried about when it came to unintended pit stops. That's going to be bad news for Haley Smith, and that's a front right puncture, and they're drifting into the racing line, managing to thankfully avoid any serious incident there with any of the drivers. But Haley's going to have to nurse his car back to the pit lane and get that front right tyre repaired. So unfortunate for Bingus, but look at that front disc there. Thankfully not too far to go to the pit lane, and it's just coming up here on the left hand side, so Haley will be able to get back into the pit lane and get repaired. But unfortunate result for Haley Smith so early on in the race. Back here to P14 we've got our Lazaro, and they are 0.2 of a second behind Clio. Clio up to P12, or P13 sorry at the moment. Lazaro and Smith, S. Smith this is, in P15 and 15 respectively. That's S. Smith now kind of closing in on the rear end of our Lazaro. A little bit of a gap there. It's taking slightly different lines as well. No slipstream being used until tucking in behind just now. Again, not entirely clear actually how much of an impact slipstream is going to be having on this circuit with these cars, because it might be engine revs and top end speed which is the limiting factor. Seem to be seeing a little bit of slipstream maybe kicking in now for Smith as they approach Lazaro, edging closer. Here in P2 we've got Crozet Leading a little bit of a train. You've got Pichon and Uatilla 0.5 of a second apart. Something else that's worth mentioning is that unlike normal GP racing, blue flags do not apply in this type of racing, and lapped cars are not required to get out of the way for cars which are lapping, which can make for some interesting dynamics, and drivers will have to carefully pick when they wish to overtake and how they wish to do that. Caution being advised at all times, of course. But now it's probably worth just getting into some of the information from the closeout of the last round, which of course was Montenay and Monteleri, sorry. And what we have is the following penalties for repair fees. So try and bring the. There we go. So go through this. So Crozet, who we're actually observing right now, received a 20,000 credits and a 15,000 credits penalty for a crash involving a 100 km/h incident and another one for a 50 km/h incident. That's the highest of the fees. We've got Tolonin, 10,000 credits for 2 crashes over 50 km/h. Withoft with a 10,000 credits for a crash over 100 km/h. That's interesting that that's... Oh, sorry, yes, it's 2 50s and 1 100, 10,000. Hallen also 10,000 credits for a crash over 100 km/h. Mikkola, 10,000 credits for 2 crashes over 50. Renaud with a 5,000 credit repair fee there for a single incident over 50 km/h. And then you also have the same for Korkayowski, Lafrege and Clio, who all received a 5,000 credit repair bill. In addition to that, we had a few penalty tickets which were submitted and reviewed, and that includes Tolonin, Nurmi and Mikkola, each of which receiving 5,000 credits in fees for causing an accident. And then interestingly, we have the following drivers who didn't finish the race and therefore received no prize money, and that includes Korkayowski, Tolonin, Crozet, Mikkola, Herrera and Kusler, who all DNF'd. Now the race today is 120 laps, as I mentioned. It's expected to last around 2 to 2.5 hours depending on lap times. You can see last lap time was 1 minute 19, so probably about 2.5 hours expected in terms of the race duration today. And you can see here that the action between Pichon, Uatilla and Silverstone is starting to heat up, but they're still 0.3, 0.4 of a second apart. Further down here in P11 we've got Tolonin just overtaking, and that's Kayla Fredge just tucking in behind. Tolonin of course in the only car of its type on the circuit, that's the Studebaker. Looks like Kayla Fredge isn't quite done yet and is eyeing up a potential comeback, although they have lost out on the straight line speed, it looks like. I do like how Kayla Fredge has applied kind of a rusty livery here. You can see actually they are making up some time in the corners, and that's the advantage of the European Bugatti here versus the Studebaker, which Tolonin has opted for this race. And Lafrege looking for a line down the right hand side here between the wall. Tolonin, that's slightly brave, but again losing out on that straight line speed, so it's a little bit of a Battle of the Titans here. We've got cornering speed versus straight line speed, and at the moment, unclear who's going to win out on that one. Once again back into the corner, and the closing speed in favour of Kayla Frege here. Of course, it's going to be a bit of a yo-yo position here, because every time Kayla Frege gets close or gets past, Tollinen's just going to use that straight line speed to open up the gap. Which reminds me of those swinging 60s battles you see at the Goodwood Revival, with the Mini Cooper battling against some kind of muscle car, and the Mini's got it in the corners but doesn't have it on the straights, and they kind of trade blows back and forth for the duration. Once again, Kayla Frege closing in with the first of the two corners here. Of course, the shorter gap between these doesn't allow Tonlin to extend too much, and that allows Kayla Frege to start closing in again on the corner here. But again, back onto the straight, and that's where Tonlin can just open the taps and start to walk it down the main straight. Let's talk a little bit about the circuit today. So Indianapolis is a 4-kilometre long rectangular oval tarmac track with historical bricks in the main straight. And as I mentioned, the AAA regulations only allow the use of the Firestone Speedway Indy tyres, so all the cars are using that. And whilst it's a pretty durable tyre, it has less grip than the European GP tyres. But it should last the entirety of the race distance. But they will be pretty worn out by the end, so you might see a bit of degradation in lap times as we get to the latter stages of this race. And that might necessitate some tyre changing to occur. So in addition, the AAA regulations demand different engine and tyre regulations, and oval racing itself requires a lot more durability from the cars than the regular GP racing. All European origin cars have gone through massive rebuilds, as I was mentioning earlier on, so if you're just joining us, I'll just recap that for you. So the engines have had to be made unsupercharged, the chassis and suspension have undergone major stiffening, and the cooling has been improved to sustain the constant high revs. And then, as the European cars have been originally made for twisty tracks and GP racing, they're more agile and oversteery than the American specially made cars for Indianapolis. As Indy cars, the origins of what we would consider a modern Indy car. But that's a double-edged sword, so it's given an easier turn-in for the corners and therefore faster lap times in the short term. However, they might get too oversteery with the tyre wear in the latter stages of the race. But on the other hand, the Indy cars are quite understeery, and they may suffer from heating front tyres too much. So you can see that actually happening a little bit here between Tollenin and Lafrege, with Lafrege making up a bit of time in the corners, carrying a bit more speed through them and turning in more easily, whereas Tollenin is struggling in those mid-corner speeds and actually has to make up that time back on the straight. So at the moment, with fresh tyres, this isn't really exacerbating the differences between the cars, but as the race goes on, we might see that dynamic start to change as Kayla Frege and Tollenin overtake one of the back markers as well. Bit of a honk of the horn there from the Frege or Tollenin. Something else that's worth mentioning is that another factor is the fuel consumption and the fuel feed, which can be affected by long, fast corners. So we've seen this in some of the mods in AC, that if it's modelled correctly, turning the car in a certain direction will shift the fuel level in the fuel tank, and if the fuel tank is a little bit too empty, even though you might have fuel technically, the pickup point for the pump may actually be starved of fuel, given the constant turning in one direction. I mean, I would assume that the Indy cars are set up in such a way that the fuel is leaning towards the fuel pump, but for the European GP cars it may be different. And that can starve the engine of fuel if you don't keep enough fuel in the tank, so drivers are potentially going to be carrying more fuel than they might otherwise need, just to ensure that they don't starve the engine during the cornering. Worst case scenario would be limping back to the pits with insufficient fuel, which may compromise a race win. And of course, has been mentioned in chat, so hello there, thank you for your comment. Yes, as I mentioned earlier, the cooling solution, we've seen that be a problem in the previous races here, and that's usually when the engines have a bit of a chance to cool down in some of the slower corners, whereas here you're sitting at the high ends of the rev limiter most of the time, and that's going to be putting a lot of stress and heat into the engine. So mechanical failures may be an issue that plague the race as we go through. Weather today is a little bit cloudy at first, but will clear up more during the mid-course, and no rain is forecasted, which I'm sure is going to be a relief to the drivers. Let's take a look here at the number 8 car driven by Pichon, and currently in 3rd place, and Uatilla 0.4 of a second behind in the number 14 car. Currently in amongst the traffic. As I mentioned before, there's no blue flags in this type of racing, so there won't be any kind of getting out of the way necessarily. You can fight. Take a little look back here at Tolnin and Lafrege, where once again Lafrege getting right up alongside Tolnin, only to be left for dust on the straight. Yes, it's quite incredible the quality of the modding which has gone into these cars, and the fact that they can model so many things like that. Also being able to repair tyres on the side of the track. It's a fantastic addition to the mod, and has been very interesting to see how that plays out in some of the races. Pulling in now only 0.2 of a second ahead of Lafrege, and Lafrege again sneaking down that right hand side, but very quickly losing out on straight line speed as the Indy car just starts to pull away. And 17 laps of the race already concluded. Another 103 to go. Let's take a quick look at Rosen and Withoft here, who are just trading positions as the number 58 car, driven by Withoft, just losing out there, dropping down to P8. Behind one of the Talbots, driven by Rosen. Talbot being one of the cars which is slated as being probably the second best in terms of contenders here today, at least from a top-end speed point of view. Equally, back here in P3, Pichon, Uatilla and now Severston, all within a few milliseconds of each other. But again, Withoft and Rosen side by side. Now we'll see the straight line speed difference between these two. It does seem like the number 58 has a slight advantage given enough straight line speed. They do pull away, bouncing away as they bob down the brick part of the track. Let's see whether Paul van Rosen can bring it back in the corners, and again does seem to have the advantage in the corners, but straight line speed not going the way of the Talbots compared to the number 58. Does seem to be at the latter end of the straight. The number 58 car just seems to get a burst of speed that the Talbot just can't match. But then the Talbot has the ability to reel in Withoft in the corners, which helps when there's two of them kind of back to back with only a short straight in between. That doesn't allow width off to extend too much. But that being said, the gap now between these two is extending quite significantly. And I would say that Rosen's no longer in slipstream territory, which isn't helping matters. Oh, we've had a bit of an incident down here. Looks like we've got Pereira currently going backwards down the track at 70 kilometers an hour with one wheel missing, and there's number 66 car driven by Darling. These seem to be the main participants in the accident, and they are going to have to wait to turn around. This is going to be a bit tricky for them, given that there's fencing either side of the circuit, but thankfully Darling manages to turn the car around without too much issue. And here comes another car missing a wheel. Number 30, Kai Severston. Now, Lazaro attempting to turn the car safely. They're going to have to try and time this. That's right, there's a car coming straight up now, which I don't think's necessarily seen them. Definitely not turning or getting out of the way. Surely it's... Oh, it's got two front wheels missing, which is probably why they weren't able to turn very effectively. This is bad news for Pereira. It's going to be quite a large setback. Finally getting the car turned around and heading in the right direction. So let's go to Tolonin and Lafrege, where Lafrege is just starting to close in on Tolonin once again, but Tolonin using that straight line speed to leave Lafrege frustrated in the background. And I think we've got another accident here as well. We've got Attila with two right punctures by the looks of it and some significant damage. Dropping positions. Behind them as well we've got Lazaro. No, sorry, it's Bar with significant front damage. Both wheels turned very much too much to the left, and a front right puncture as well, which isn't helping things at all. Brave to be off the circuit on the dirt here. That could lead to getting bogged down quite easily. But they are heading back. There, up ahead you can see another of our injured cars heading back to the pit lane. So, ooh, I thought Hayley Smith was going to struggle a little bit there. They seem to have a little bit of damage, maybe, but it could just be the graphic glitch. Yes, as I was mentioning at the beginning of the race, in an ideal set of circumstances, with the right fuel consumption, you might be able to get most of the way through the race without having to do more than a splash and dash, possibly changing tyres. But unintended pit stops were a factor, which I did mention, and you can see here some of these drivers now limping back to the pit lane to undertake those unintended pit stops that we were worried about. That certainly caught up a few drivers, with Kai Severston, Darling, and a few other drivers. Pereira fully struggling with their rear right here, unable to get some traction. You can see on the road surface some of the other cars which have been through here with their punctured tyres, leaving grooves etched into the tarmac. comes Lazaro. Few tenths of a second behind Henry. And these two are very evenly matched, both in terms of their choice of car, but also their position on the track. Looks like Lazaro trying to slipstream a little bit there, but unable to quite make it work. Also got Tolnin in the pits, which is unexpected. Unless they were caught up in the incident without me having spotted it. But they've it's a little bit too early to be in for fuel, I would have thought. But we'll have to see what happens to Tolnin later on. Meanwhile, we've got Clio being overtaken by Pichon. Meanwhile, it's Henry and Lazaro who are providing the closest action. You can see the understeer there kicking in. Lazaro now overtaking, or attempting to, side by side as they head down to turn 1. And back here with Henry, you can see them working the wheel as they nurse the car around the corner. Taking a slightly deeper entrance to the second corner, which probably won't help with their top end speed and keeping up with Lazaro here. But again, not really capitalising on any slipstream which might be available because they've delayed their turn in. Imagine that was Ledoux Talbot. And it was. So, Lazaro's leaving Henry behind. Let's go to the two Smiths though. We've got S. Smith and H. Smith. Switching positions with Bingus 1, driven by Haley Smith, who we saw have the puncture earlier on in the race. Probably our first victim of incident. Just managed to capitalise on a little bit of an overtake there and move up to P10. A good recovery. So 26 laps completed now of the race, and track conditions have just hit 100%. Marcus Peltonen still leading the race, but only by 4 seconds, which is a little bit less than we normally see in some of the races we've had previously, where the lead can be quite significant. I guess that's a consequence of this type of circuit and the type of racing involved today. So most of the drivers now starting to get a little bit more spread out. We do have a little bit of a proximity here between Withoft and Rosen. And we've also got Zaro and Henry, who are edging closer together actually. Henry have a bit of a good line here and catching a little bit. Watching that a little bit short-lived there. Number 28 car, that was Clio, just whizzing past. Actually, no, sorry, I'm corrected. We've got Paul van Rosen in the number 28 and Clio also driving the number 28. Yeah, solid effort from Lafrege. Let's have a quick look at his Bugatti with the very meticulously completed livery with its rust patterns. Done a great job with the interior as well. You can see the rusty kind of dashboard and so on, as if it's been sitting in a barn for a few decades and restored to glory. So, a bit of traffic here for Withoft and Rosen as they head down the back straight. And it's Paul van Rosen who's edging closer here to the number 58 car driven by Withoft. There's Tollenin in the Studebaker. Here's Paul van Rosen going for the overtake. Normally though, see the number 58 start to gain a bit of top end speed towards the end of these straights, and you can see that's starting to kick in now as they just start to edge away. 190 kilometers an hour. Paul van Rosen just able to keep pace for about 2/3 of that straight before falling a little bit further away and then having to make up for that in the corners. A little bit worried he was about to slip up there and hit the wall, but thankfully didn't. So both drivers here seemingly. Actually interesting. It's Paul van Rosen's in the number 22 car, but the tower is saying 28. Same with Korkajowski, that says 28, and then Clio also 28. So Rosen here battling with Tollenin, but not for position. Just trading positions as they go around the corners. It does look like Withoft has opened up a nice substantial gap here. 1.3 seconds separating them from Withoft. That's probably true, yes. Cooling down. A suggestion from chat. It looks like Marcus Pelton and Crozet are only separated by about 3.5 seconds. Beyond that, Hallin 34 seconds behind, so it's quite a substantial gap to fill there. Meanwhile, Withoft about 9 seconds off the podium at this stage, but plenty of racing left to go. It's a good point around cooling, because despite the upgrades to the cooling systems, it may be that the drivers have to kind of ease off a little bit just to maintain their engine performance and integrity, and that might shake things up a little bit as the race carries on. Withoft hitting about 205 kilometers an hour there. Meanwhile, our race leader Marcus Pelton out in the lead in the Bugatti, only 3.2 seconds ahead of Crozet. Got Kai Severston in the pit lane. Still in the car, so I guess just repairing. Sometimes you have to double check that they're still connected to the session, because it would just show them in the pit lane, but they might have disconnected. And here's Kai Severston just leaving the pit lane and heading back onto the track. And there was Lafreds just heading past. So with 34 laps of the race completed, weather has started to clear up a little bit. Clouds still in the sky, but a bit brighter. Yeah, there's no rain expected for today's racing, but that is only a forecast. Thank you for the clarification there. I did tell Tolnin at the beginning of this series that I would probably murder a few people's names during the commentary, and he said just to do it with conviction and don't worry about it. So that's what I've been doing, and I'm glad someone's pointed out the first of the probably hilarious pronunciation fails. So with off just overtaking one of the back markers. Looks like the number 20 car, so 30 car, which is Kai Severston that we saw in the pits a few moments ago. And it looks like the Frege has got some competition here from the Talbot. Again, not for position, but any time you've got cars in close proximity on a track like Indianapolis, it can spell disaster, so always worth looking at what's happening there. It's good to know. So Paul van Rosen here, still struggling a little bit to keep pace with their main competition of the day, which is with Oft. Holding steady around this kind of 1.9 to 2 second gap further back here. They are in the rather fetching Talbot. There we go, that's the camera angle I'm looking for. Quite a sleek little machine. But again, at that stage of the race now where everyone's a little bit too spread out for any distinct battles to form, but let's go and have a look at Rosette, who is just dealing with a little bit of cobbles at the moment. 207 kilometers an hour I think I spotted there, so quite a speedy little machine, the Bugatti. So what is going to be interesting is the, we've seen a few unintended pit stops, but going back to the intended pit stops, it'll be interesting to see who starts to come in for the pits and when. I'm assuming, given the comments earlier on around fuel tank capacity, there will be two triggers for coming into the pit lane. There will be like a regular strategy which says I'm looking to refuel the car around this point because that's what I think is going to work best for my race strategy. But there may also be that kind of issue with the fuel pickup being starved of fuel mid-corner, so that might necessitate an earlier pit stop depending on how much fuel the drivers are consuming and whether that's in on track with what they were planning for. But I imagine it's probably going to be a little bit later on, maybe around that 50, 60, where the fuel stops might begin. Seems to be some kind of go to Hallen here because I think in the pit lane there was a bit of dust being kicked up by something. Again, we've got the issue of the tyre degradation to look forward to as well, which might make the European cars a little bit too tail happy in the corners. There does seem to be some kind of dust being kicked up in the pit lane. We're getting closer to it now. Let's see what that looks like in first person view. There it is. Something's definitely amiss in the pit lane. Oh, it's actually potentially Pereira's car here who has disconnected. It seems to be just glitching and just spitting out dust and so on. A bit odd. Now what's interesting here is Haley Smith making some pretty big inroads here against Kay Lafrege. I don't know if Kay Lafrege is just cooling the car down or so, but Haley does seem to be approaching with a fair amount of overspeed, which isn't not what we normally have seen. The mighty Bingus now overtaking the number 314 Bugatti, driven by Lafrege. And the Bingus overtaking the Bugatti there with quite a lot of determination. I think that's probably a consequence of Haley Smith's earlier accident in the race, having put them a bit further back, and they've now managed to overtake as they work their way back up the grid, given they have a slightly faster car. You can see here from Lafrege's point of view, they do have a little bit of traffic now overtaking. But what we do also have is our good friends Lazzaro and Henry edging closer together again. Ooh, and there's the Talbot. That's Paul van Rosen. Just ending up into the wall there. And somehow, no tyre punctures. Is a miracle. And they're on the way, facing the right direction. That could be damage though, which I'm going to only be able to speculate at. See if they head into the pit lane, and it looks like they might be. Yep, here we go. So Ledoux overtakes Paul van Rosen, and Kwiatkowski will be up next, as they're only a few seconds behind. Here they come. And that drops Paul van Rosen down to P7 in the number 28 Talbot. Well, 28/22, given the number on the side of the car versus the number in the tower. But Paul van Rosen's back out on track already, so whatever the damage was, it was relatively minor. So Marcus Peltonen still leading this race by 3.3 seconds. I'm assuming their teammate Nurmi hasn't been able to make it today because I don't see Nurmi in the list. And Nurmi is usually not far from Peltonen, given they're both very quick and teammates. But our our aforementioned and much talked about Crozet is now 2.8 seconds behind. So actually gaining a little bit of time here. That was previously around 3.5 seconds, and that's slowly closing down to what is approaching 2.5. Although I say that just as they move back to 3. I have a sneaking suspicion that they are starting to edge a little bit closer. Might be a consequence of the traffic which Peltonen is just navigating through at the present moment, but be interesting to see whether a battle for the lead starts to unfold in due course. Holding steady at 2.5 seconds. Traffic on the main straight here, coming past the pit lane. A little bit of traffic here for Peltonen. Nothing too substantial. Looks like Pichon, who is in the number 8 car, just directly behind Peltonen at this stage, but again not for position. That's separated by a gap of 17 positions, but that is the immediate kind of track car on track in proximity. Looks like Lazaro or Henry up ahead. Peltonen carrying a significant amount of speed compared to the other cars on the track at the moment. 197, 205, 206 kilometers an hour there briefly. Being 212, I think, for a second. On as well, just easing their way through the traffic as they continue their charge. But as we approach lap 50, we're not quite at the halfway point, but getting there. And Marcus Pelton remains a steady presence at the front of this grid. Meanwhile, further down in P13, we've got Tolonen and Uatila, separated by 0.2 of a second. It does look like Uatila's got some damage to that front wheel. Yeah, look at that front right. It's definitely a little bit skew whiff there, but they are somehow managing to challenge Tolonen here, despite a wheel which is facing in the wrong direction. And I can't imagine that's doing wonders for the tyre wear. Drivers going 3 wide as they head down the back straight. A back straight, it's actually the front straight. Look at this, Uatila down the inside, heading down into T1. Tolonen having to drop in behind in P13. Welcome, Dimitri, and thank you. It's yes, it's a pleasure to be here at CVR as well. Yes, despite the damage that appears to be afflicting Uatila's front right, his Bugatti is, or say their Bugatti, is still flying along, and they haven't felt the need to pit just yet. Quite disconcerting, I would say, from the driver's point of view, to see that front right tyre just turning a little bit inward. But it seemingly isn't slowing the car down. 206 kilometers an hour there. Just touching 210 almost as they head into turn 1. So it could be a visual thing, although there is a bit of smoke coming off it there. It could be a visual thing, but it doesn't seem to be stopping Kari Uatila from hitting the lofty heights of the Bugatti's top end speed. So, meanwhile at the front, I mentioned that Pelton was leading this race, but keeping an eye in the rearview mirror for Rosette in the number 6, who is starting to get closer. 2.3 seconds, that was 3.5 previously. We were watching it just kind of close down to 2.5, but it's now definitely getting a little bit closer as our fellow Bugatti driver here edges a little bit closer to the front. Indeed, Dimitri, they've fully optimised at least one of the wheels on the car for turning left. So I wonder if this is a consequence, because you know there's no traffic holding Pelton up right now. That has been a little bit in the past, but I wonder if this is a consequence of Pelton having just eased off a little bit to maintain the engine, or whether Crozet has simply managed to nail the corners here. But the gap is definitely getting a little bit smaller. Hi, Severson, back in the pits once again. This time, oh, I was going to say disconnected, but still in the car. So, oh, no, I spoke too soon. They have unfortunately disconnected. So we've lost Pereira and Kai Siversen, the Myers was the pace car, so that wasn't ever part of the race, but a lovely pace car it is. You can see here though, we've got Henry in P11 with a very quick Uatilla coming up behind. And Uatilla thinking about the side they're going to overtake. They thought about going right, but they went left in the end, and now they're side by side. With that very funny looking wheel. And that puts Uatilla up to P11, now splitting Lazzaro and Henry as they start to continue their charge to the front. And now it's the turn of Lazzaro to fall victim to Uatilla, the mighty Bugatti. And Uatilla's now up to P10, Lazzaro and Henry dropping to P11 and 12 respectively. So back to our race leader, Marcus Peltonen. In the background you've still got Pichon there, which is number 8 car, still in P18. Marcus now navigating a little bit of traffic. Seeing this correctly, that we've got... Ooh, Smith is off the track. With bad news, looks like a rear right puncture. They're attempting to get to the tarmac, but they have a slight incline to deal with, and that is causing some issues, it seems. Yep, there they go. Just need to get that wheel... Ooh, look at that front wheel. That isn't looking too hot. And attempting to rejoin safely here. That rear right just hitting the tarmac now, which might afford them a little bit more traction, but seemingly struggling at the moment. And you have to keep your eyes peeled if you're coming around the corners here, because you may not be expecting a car to be rejoining at this point. I think they're just about managing it now. There we go. Just need to get a little bit of that rear left on, and then they should be good. You see it actually is a little bit of a lip on the track there, which is causing a little bit of a headache here for Sam Smith. There was the race leader, Marcus Peltonen, coming through, followed by Rosette, who is about to go sub 2 seconds. So close, but so far from being on the circuit. The cars really do struggle to get underway in these kind of situations. I've seen this in a few of the races here at CVR, particularly if any kind of incline is involved. And we've seen all kinds of tactics being used. We've seen drivers reversing onto the circuit. I think Sam's got the right idea here. If you can make the joining angle as gentle as possible, it should, in theory, make it a bit easier to get onto the grey stuff. I'm going to stay here and observe, not to add any pressure to Sam Smith here, but just to make sure we catch any potential accidents if any drivers do happen to. Not see Sam here. Maybe they can just get a bit of momentum and then turn, which I think seems to be the plan presently. Get a bit of forward momentum and then turn onto the circuit. But they are going to potentially do some harm to their engine if they can't keep it cool in the situation. I think they're turning. Are they on? Yes, they're on. So, there we go. Sam Smith can now attempt to get the car underway, but the traction just doesn't seem to be there. But at least they are now moving. So, we'll leave Sam to continue, whilst we'll go back to Marcus Pelton and see how they fare here at the front of the grid with a main competition only 2 seconds behind now. So we have Crozet here, whose name I now know I am butchering, but I've been reliably informed to continue butchering it, so I shall do so. But they are 2.2 seconds behind, and they are starting to get close enough now that they might be able to take advantage of some slipstream within the next few laps. And we're just about to hit the halfway point in this race with 57 laps completed. 60 will mark the halfway point. There's Sam Smith on the side of the track. They've got a fairly long way to go until they get back to this pit box. Here's the slipstream opportunity starting to present itself. Let's see if this helps with the overtake speeds. They go around the outside there, but switches back to the inside as they seemingly have lost a little bit of time here to Pelton, given the traffic that they're dealing with. 2.7 seconds now, almost undoing the last few laps of progress, but overtaking traffic nonetheless. Meanwhile, Lafrege and Tolonen continue their battle. Pop back to them in a few moments. Now again, it's unclear to me at this stage when the pit stops will begin, but let's go and take a look at Tolnin and Lafrege as their battle between the Bugatti and the Studebaker continues. This time Lafrege going around the outside and seemingly able to exercise a little bit more overspeed than previously. Tolnin typically making the time back on the straights here, so we'll see whether they are able to achieve that now, but they don't seem to be gaining as quickly as they used to be getting away, so I wonder if Tolnin is now in some kind of cooling down phase potentially, or nursing the car back to the pits for a pit stop. Sam Smith has made it back to the pits by the looks of it. Korkowski and Paul van Rosen have just traded positions. Korkowski coming into the pits. I was expecting Tolnin to be pitting, given they are losing so much time to Lafrege, but that doesn't seem to be the case. So Haley Smith taking P7 as Korkowski remains in the pits, and here's Peltonen in amongst the fray with a bit of traffic. Rosette now 1.9 seconds, so closing in. There's Tolnin. But Peltonen's now come into the pit lane, which is changing things up a little bit, so I was wondering when they'd be pitting. And it seems the half race distance wasn't too bad of a guess on my part, but that does mean that Crozet might be pitting on the next lap, and Peltonen might be strategically pitting at this stage. Let's see what happens on the next turn round to the pits. Does look like a little bit of traffic ahead again. Rosette now heading to the pit lane, or the pit straight. Might stay out for longer. That's Lafrege. Definitely not slowing down for the pit lane this time. Interesting how a pit stop actually almost takes you down around a lap and a quarter. Allen's also pitted, so Ledoux and Rosen will take the lead temporarily in P4 and 5, but likely that will change later when the pit stops come in. Haley Smith up to P6 now on account of the pit stops. So Peltonen just leaving the pit lane now. That's almost 2 laps down that it puts them compared to Rosette, who was 2 seconds behind originally. That looks like Withoft just behind. And it is indeed. Will the Bugatti be able to hold the Alpha at bay? Here's that the Alpha loses out in the corners a little bit there compared to the Bugatti. So once again, no pit stop for Rosette, and they continue. At least for now, to lead the race, and it will be whenever they pit that we'll see Peltonen most likely come back and reassume the race lead. Although of course there might be a change in strategy here between the two, and there might be an ace up the sleeve here for our current race leader, who may be able to take advantage of that to retain the lead, but it will be very much dependent on the length of the pit stop and how quickly they can get back on track. So Lafrege and Henry have just traded positions, and it's an accident between these two. Bad news for Lafrege, who somehow manages to keep going in a straight line, whereas Henry has spun to their demise with both front tyres out of action, but the tank that is Lafrege's Bugatti seems to be taking over just fine. An unfortunate result there for Henry. We'll have to see whether Lafrege comes into the pit lane, which may happen depending on how much damage they have picked up. A honk there between the 66 and the 314. Looks like Lafrege is heading in for a pit stop. Meanwhile, Peltonen has just come alongside Paul van Rosen and reassumes P4, whilst Henry struggles back to the pit lane. question on everyone's mind at this point is, when is Rosette's coming into the pit lane? It won't be this lap. While Henry struggling back to the pits here with their two very broken front wheels. I think they are on the home stretch now. The pit lane is ahead. And in the background, a large amount of traffic heading down. Henry works their way slowly but surely to the pit lane. Now they should get those two tyres fixed up and on their way. And the tyres have been fixed. Which is a bit interesting, given they hadn't come to a complete stop. That was a record pit stop time for this era. So back to our race leader, and they are currently going toe to toe with the number 58 Alpha again, although separated by a lap. And the driver briefing did mention that tyre degradation might become a factor towards the latter stages of the race. So that may actually mean that some of these cars who have changed their tyres might have a little bit of an advantage from that point of view, but I imagine the key question would just be simply fuel strategy for these race leaders here. So Withoft, Rosette, Ledoux, Peltonen, Paul van Rosen and so on, they stand a better chance given that they won't need to change their tyres in theory. Just got a very quick stop, pop some fuel in and off they go. Pulling in, 0.2 of a second behind Lazaro there, just overtaking now to assume P12. Very determined Crozet's here heading back to the pit lane. Well, I assume pit lane. They're going to have to pit at some point, but they seem to be pushing as far as they can in the Bugatti. Haley Smith in the pit lane as well. Currently in P7 for the time being. Ooh, we've got Lafrege again. Caught out in an accident here. Very bad news. And they've only just been in the pits, I think, so they'll be heading back there again, undoubtedly. Which is very bad news for the Frenchman. Although, it doesn't seem like they're coming in, so maybe they've managed to get away unscathed. So once again, doesn't seem to be any indication that we'll be seeing a pit stop from our race leader on this lap. And Marcus Pelton will have to wait a fair bit longer. And lap 71 already, it's flying by. So here we have it, Crozet now pulling over to the left hand side as they indicate their intention to pit after what seemed like an eternity. That will now afford Marcus Pelton the opportunity to resume their position, but of course they do have Withoft and Ledoux who have yet to pit ahead of them. But I would imagine we're going to see Marcus Pelton resume at least third position as they round the lap and will undoubtedly overtake Crozet in the pit lane. There we go, Pelton up to third place. They've just overtaken Ledoux, and that will put them into third place legitimately. I think Ledoux still has to pit, so that will change the running order quite significantly when that does occur. And Pelton just coming round again for a run down to the start-finish line. Question is, will Crozet be coming out of the pit lane before Marcus Pelton is able to catch up? I don't think that's going to be the case, given they're yet to get underway. In theory, they should come out about 2 seconds after Pelton, but as they haven't started moving yet, and the difference in acceleration to the top end speed will probably mean it's going to be a little bit more than 2 seconds. They rejoin the fray in fourth place. Ledoux, of course, has yet to pit, so that will mean that Crozet will end up back in third place in a short period of time, I would have thought, but it's going to be now when Withoft comes in for the pits, which is the question. And they're in the Alpha, which wasn't stated in the briefing that I was provided as being one of the cars that could make it to the end of the race without refueling. That was only one of the American Indy cars. That does bring Marcus Pelton back to P2 for the time being, and likely well on their way to P1 as soon as number 58 car in the lead will be coming into the pits. and there's Ledoux into the pit lane. That allows Crozet to resume third place, which I imagine will soon to be second place as soon as Withoft comes in for their pit stop. Just overtaking either Lazaro or Henry, I can't quite tell, the livery's identical. So at 75 laps, Withoft is likely going to need to be pitting soon. We haven't heard any kind of engine cutouts yet, but that was an issue, that the fuel tank can be starved of, well, even if it has fuel in it, it can be such a low level that it might starve the engine pickup from getting any fuel if you're turning left continuously. See whether they're going to be coming in for the pits this lap. Doesn't look like it. Very interested to see if by some miracle Withoft can make it to the end of the race without having to pit, but I think that quite unlikely. I can't hear any engine issues at the moment. Seem to be fine from a fuel point of view, and no intention being signalled just yet to come in for the pit stop. See whether they can push it to lap 80. That might be a nice round number for Withoft to want to do the pit stop. Maybe they've got a particular strategy that they're aiming for, or they're just going to be pushing us as far as they can. I'm going to be going back into this view here just to keep an ear on the engine, if we can hear any kind of issues there. again, doesn't seem to be heading towards the pit lane. Meanwhile, we've got Darling in the number 66, catching up with Kayla Fresh here. Taking on the left-hand side. To assume P10 for Darling. But as it stands, Withoft is 43 seconds ahead of Peltonen, but is owing us a pit stop at some point. And Rosette is 20 seconds behind Peltonen now, despite the fact that when Peltonen initially came into the pit stop, quite a few laps before Crozet, it was only 2 seconds between them. So that either means that Crozet had a much longer pit stop, or Peltonen has really been making up the time on the track in that time. So as we hit lap 80, this was my thought process, for no other reason than it being a nice round number. We might see Withoft coming into the pit lane on this lap, but we've been waiting patiently, and there's been no indication just yet that it's going to happen. If Withoft is going to be pitting this lap, they might not swing out to the right hand side as they have done, so I think they are staying out once again, leaving us wondering when exactly this pit stop's going to be happening. There wasn't any specific mention of the Alpha in the briefing notes that Tolnan has kindly provided to me about the Alpha having, you know, particularly notable endurance from a fuel saving point of view, and at the moment they've managed to do 81 laps on their current fuel without seemingly compromising the engine's ability to pick up the fuel from the fuel tank, which was another concern mentioned. once again, no pit stop for the number 58 car. And despite there being a few laps for it to have happened, Crozet does not have or doesn't appear to have got any closer to Marcus Peltonen. So that 20-second gap separating P2 and 3 has remained very stable over the last few laps. Ah, here we go. It might appear that Withoft is heading to the pit lane. They aren't slowing down, so... Oh no, here they go. They just decide to slow down a lot later than most people do, and that is resulting in quite a suboptimal pit entry. And they're in the pit box. That was, well, points for style. That's definitely one way of entering your pit box. You saw usually most drivers slowing down quite some measure before then, but Withoft seems to have decided to push it to the limit and did the 360 reverse entry pit stop special. There we have it, Marcus Peltonen back into the race lead position on lap 83. So another 37 laps to go. Crozet now joining into the P2 position. As we approach the closing quarter of this race, it's going to be a question now of whether Crozet can repeat what we saw in the first half of this race of closing the gap to Marcus Peltonen and having a shot at the victory here. But looking at the last lap times, 1:16.873 for Marcus Peltonen, 1:16.525 for Crozet. So there is a chance here, but they will have to be consistent in their approach and continuously look to close this gap. As you can see, the gap doesn't seem to be closing for very long when it does. Rosette's just overtaking Lafrege once again. Yeah, so the gap remaining fairly stable, maybe a slight little bit being nibbled away here by the P2 number 6 car. But they will have to be very consistent in their approach if they want to close this gap of 20 seconds or so before the end of this race, despite the fact that there are 34 laps to go. We have Tolonin currently running in P12 with what looks like Pichon. Yep, side by side. Here we are on board with the Tolonin, nursing his car through the corners. Like how the tower next to the start-finish line looks like a little bit like a pagoda. But almost coming up to lap 90 now, and you can see Withoft is back out on track. And currently running in P3 with Hallen down in P4. Paul van Rosen 5th place. Paul van Rosen in the Talbot there seems to be struggling with a flat front right tyre. And they are somewhat in the middle of the road. But thankfully not too far now from the pit lane. And Paul van Rosen's in the pit. Let's see if their tyre magically heals itself upon hitting the pit box. Yes, it does. Interesting, so just getting back to your pit box immediately fixes the tyre. Meanwhile at the front here, just approaching lap 90, we've got Marcus Peltonen, our race leader, who has been without doubt throughout the majority of this race. And now we have lap 90, so just another 30 to go. So at this stage of the race we might actually start to see a little bit of the tyre issues that were mentioned, and actually what's interesting here is Marcus Pelton is heading towards the pit lane by the looks of it. Again, braking fairly late. And this is interesting because there's not much time left in this race, and I wasn't expecting Marcus Pelton to be coming in for a pit stop. That's going to allow Crozet to come whizzing past, and there they go. Now, are we going to see another pit stop from Crozet? Because if not, that's the hope of the race win for Marcus Pelton and Dashed. I wonder what's brought them in. Maybe they've got some kind of mechanical failure, which would be, I'm sure, very frustrating. And Marcus Pelton's back out. But possibly a lap down now for Crozet, so very intriguing. Expecting that at this stage. While Marcus Pelton is back under full steam, they are now 57 seconds behind Crozet, and that's going to mean, unless there's a pit stop from our race leader now, I don't expect we'll see a change in position here, subject to any unforeseen accidents or issues, mechanical in nature, happening. Meanwhile, Withoft has got Allen in the Talbot coming up behind and actually going for the overtake. So Withoft has crashed out. I wasn't expecting at all. So we might see a pit stop there. Yeah, they've got a rear right puncture for Withoft. That is very unfortunate for Withoft. They've done a stellar job of getting this far in the race with within the top four. And Withoft now entering the pit box. It's very interesting. I wonder why Pelton had to pit then. Here's Hallin, side by side with Crozet, but of course separated by a lap. Lap 95 now. Just another 25 to go. And Uatilla takes advantage of Withoff's unforeseen pit stop to assume P5. And they are only 2.5 seconds behind Ledoux. Our good friend Lafrage in the 314 Bugatti. A honk there. Not long to go now. We're approaching the 100 lap point of this race, and at the moment Rosette is leading owing to an unexpected pit stop from Marcus Pelton. I thought that was it for the final running order, subject to any accidents or unforeseen issues, but Marcus Pelton came in for a pit stop very unexpectedly, and whilst it was short, it has put him 54 seconds behind our race leader. And there's not long left in this race to turn that around. Meanwhile, Uatilla still chasing down Ledoux. Might be a chance there for a top 4 finish for Uatilla. Uatilla now within 1 second and seems to be closing. The camera angle I'm looking for. Ooh, we've got looks like Tolnin and Darling off the track, potentially due to an accident between the two. And that's potentially a rear left puncture for Darling, even though it doesn't visibly show the rubber, it does show the sparks. Colin seems to be back underway, but I don't know if they're going to be coming in for a pit stop. It seemed to be indicating that they're turning towards the pit stop. Feeling that Darling won't be so lucky. But this might be a late stage race overtake for Colin if they can get round the circuit and back before Darling exits the pit lane. Meanwhile, Uatilla edging closer to the Talbot, driven by Ledoux. And there's Darling nursing the car back. So Uatilla does seem to be picking up a turn of speed here. It does look like Ledoux's actually slowed down, potentially just a touch there. Might be having to deal with heating issues. And interestingly, Uatilla decides to do the same. Could have gone for the overtake there, but seemed to have eased off a little bit. I wonder if they're in fuel saving mode or just trying to take advantage of a little bit of cooling here and slipstream Ledoux to the finish line at the last few stages of the race. And there we have it, lap 100 officially on the board. Does look like Uatilla's now pushing for the overtake, contrary to my previous suggestion. At the same time, falls back again a little bit, so I'm not entirely sure what the plan is here. Here we have the overtake from Uatilla against Ledoux to assume 4th place in this race, 101 laps, and Uatilla just slipping into 4th place there. The Talbot's actually very low to the ground compared to most cars of this era. Oh no! Uatilla's spun out. That might be what we were talking about previously, where the tyres just giving up the ghost towards the end of the race, and with the European GP cars being a little bit more feisty on the turn-in, that could be what we are seeing here. But that is really bad news for Uatilla, who has worked so hard to get to P4. Now they find themselves in a very precarious position here of attempting to try and find an opportunity to turn the car around without ruining anyone else's race in the process. Now they are trying to get the car turned around, but this is going to be really slow going for Uatilla, and they're going to be parking themselves right in the middle of the race if they aren't careful. Got another car coming. Yeah, this is really bad news for Utility. Down to P9 already. Thankfully, the next car is 1.3 laps down, but the speed that Utility is turning this car, I do suspect that even that much of a safety net won't be big enough. Once again, some cars coming in. And Utility having to very carefully negotiate this. They are literally now sat sideways in the middle of Indianapolis, which is never a safe or a desirable place to be, and I don't think the drivers are going to know which way to go. And I'd be going behind Utility at this stage, but they are... Oh dear! I don't think that driver saw what was coming there. They were so close behind car that they were chasing that they wouldn't have had any chance to react to that. And I think further down the road we're undoubtedly going to see Chloe, who probably just got the biggest jump scare of their lives. It's like by Chloe I mean Cleo. Apologies there. Yeah, what terrible news here for Utility and Cleo, who have now both got caught out at this stage of the race. 103 laps in, and the Utility going from 4th place down to what is P9 and about to be P10. Very unfortunate indeed. Utility trying their best to get the car turned and back into the race, but I mean, thankfully the pit stop is just there, so it's tantalisingly close. But what an unfortunate situation. Cleo's in the pits already, which is good news, but Utility needs to get some forward momentum here. If they can get the wheels straight, they might be able to start making some inroads here, but they are doing a very unfortunate 10 kilometers an hour here as they head towards the pit lane, and they are probably overheating the engine in the process of doing this. Meanwhile, back in the world of those who still have all their wheels attached, Haley Smith is in P7 and Paul van Rosen is a mere 1.5 seconds behind and closing. So Utility still chugging along here. That pit lane must feel like an eternity away at this speed. But they have now been overtaken by Lafrege, Tonlin and Lazaro, which puts them in P12. So very bad news. Meanwhile, our race leader Crozet is now 1 minute and 2 seconds ahead of Peltonen, so don't think there's any hope now of Peltonen catching up unless for some reason Crozet comes in for a pit stop, but I can't see any reason why they would need to unless they have a mystery issue like Peltonen did which necessitates a pit stop. But meanwhile, Paul van Rosen now closing in on Haley Smith and Bingus, and looks like we're going to see that overtake sooner rather than later. definitely carrying the speed. Struggling, it seems, to find the opportunity to overtake safely, which is crucial at this stage of the race. Here you can see Paul van Rosen going for the overtake opportunity, side by side now with Haley Smith, and Paul van Rosen slipping there into P7. Haley Smith still just 0.5 of a second behind. Uatilla still not in the pit lane. This is absolutely heartbreaking for Uatilla. They are so close and yet so far from this pit box that they are working their way towards. 10 kilometers an hour, if that. So on 109 laps into this race, we have a mere 11 laps to go, and that'll be kind of less than 15 minutes or so. Rosette leading the race still by a whole lap, with Marcus Peltonen still struggling to close any distance here, and I'm still unsure why Peltonen came in for that pit stop, but Hallin in third place. 30 seconds behind Peltonen, and Ledoux then 1.5 laps down from our top trio. Apart from that, no significantly close gaps. Have a little bit of a weight on our hands. And there's Uatilla still painfully edging their way to the pit lane. So close now. Hopefully not destroying their engine in the process. It's less than walking speed, I would say. That's very unfortunate for the Attila. And we're still here with Crozat, our race leader. Not long to go now, and they seem to be pretty steady here in the lead. Although last lap was 1:17.304, so they do seem to be struggling maybe on the tyres, which may be the limiting factor here for their race. Of course, everyone's on the same compound, and we did hear that the tyres can go full race distance, but may start to become a bit slippery towards the end. Marcus Pelton is on 1:17.604, so yeah, similar issues there for Marcus Pelton. So Withoft is in the pits and dropping down to P8. Got Tolnin in the pits once again. So once fighting for the lead of this race, Withoft is now very much in the midfield, which is unfortunate to see. Haley Smith, Borkowski separated by 5.5 seconds, which is not insurmountable, but I think the lap times are tapering off now. I think that is due to the tyres. You can see here 120s for Borkowski, 118s for Paul van Rosen, 119 for Ledoux, Hallin on a 118, 119 for Peltonen, and 117 for Crozat. So Crozat's still looking relatively fresh. I wonder if they did change their tyres, which is why their pit stop took 20 seconds longer than Peltonen's. And we are down to the last 5 laps of this race, ladies and gentlemen, so not long to go at all. And Crozet still on track for a win. The fact that they are winning this race and getting so much airtime is probably making the fact that I now knowingly know their name is pronounced entirely differently. It's probably making that even more amusing. Ooh, interesting. Helen in the pit lane. Again, late stage pit stop here. Crozet here, just behind Kay Lefrege in the 314 Bugatti. Not long to go. Worst thing that could happen now is an accident for Crozet, so if I was them I'd be very cautious about driving in traffic. That would be one hell of a tough pill to swallow if you had an accident similar to what Uatilla experienced at this stage, having led the race for so long. Uatilla thankfully in the pits now, but yet to get back out under power. Though the track temperature has remained 36 degrees, the wind has dropped off entirely, track conditions are still 100%, and we are just moments away now, a few minutes to go until we wrap up the Indy 500 here at CVR, marking the close of our 13th round of the Golden Era Championship. And it's going to be a cracking result here for Crozet, who probably wasn't expecting to finish this race in such a strong position. Heltonen, a regular at the top end of the grid, has done well to stay in P2, but surprising that they had to do that late stage pit stop, which has resulted in them falling down to P2 here. I am curious to understand more about that, so hopefully after the race we can find out a little bit more information that contributed to that last pit stop. now extremely cautious or worried whenever Crozette's getting close to other cars on the track. Not because I think anyone's going to cause an accident, but you just never know, especially with the tyres at this stage of the race being a little bit worn. It could mean, we've seen this with a few of the cars, an unexpected trip into a wall, which, as I said earlier, would be a terrible shame for our race leader here. Now Crozette crosses the line to kick off the final lap. Lap 120 here at Indianapolis. And all things remaining equal, Crozette on track here to just round off the final lap of the race and bring home the checkered flag for what has been a fantastic race here at Indianapolis. And there we have it, Crozette crosses the line, takes the checkered flag and wins the Indianapolis 500, round 13 of the Golden Era Championship, sorry. And a very well-earned victory there for Crozette. Marcus Peltonen will be picking up the P2 position. There we have it, Marcus Peltonen P2, Ledoux with a third place, and well up there. Hallen P4, Paul Van Rosen takes P5, Korkowski coming in with P6. Ailey Smith, despite having a very early incident in this race, picks up a very respectable P7, and Withoft in the number 58, who almost came in with a podium until a late stage accident. Finishes the race in P8. Alazaro in P9, Tolonin in P10, Kayla Fredge in P11, Darling in P12, Henry in P13, Pichon takes 14th place, Cleo takes 15th, and Henry in P13, sorry, yeah, Cleo P15, La in P16, and Uatilla in P17, and that leaves Smith, Kai Severston and Pereira as disconnected and DNFs. You can hear a cacophony of honking horns here as the drivers celebrate the finish of round 13. Drivers now coming round to the pit lane in formation. And that concludes the Indianapolis 500 here at CVR. I've been Pirate Laserbeam doing the commentary for today's race. It's been a pleasure to be here, and hopefully you all have enjoyed the stream. We'll be picking up next round for round number 14, and I will catch you all again soon. And I wish you all a very good rest of the weekend and a good week ahead. Catch you later all. Have a good evening.